Hey everyone. So I know I've been MIA and I'll share a bit more on why. So right now I'm trying to get back into the workforce, trying to put all my energy in that and also getting a position that is a lot more challenging than previous positions, um, or allows me to leverage my experience and knowledge and use that. So I'm aiming for more, right? I feel like a lot of times in the past when I've gone or I've applied for positions, it's more of like, I'm just applying. And it's so interesting how during those times, even if they were competitive roles, how I've managed to be selected. Not all the time, naturally, not all the time, but many of the times. And I'm not gonna lie, it seems so much more difficult now to just get your foot in the door compared to previous years. From just my experience, previous years, it just seems like all the job opportunities were always available. I applied, I heard back from multiple. Now, and maybe it's also seasonal or due to seasonal to it being the summer. A lot of people go on breaks. That's something that a recruiter, mentor that I've been working with personally in terms of providing insight or guidance when getting back into the workforce. She's like, a lot of times employers go on vacation and they do a lot of other things, or it slows down during the summer. So I'm not sure. I've never really been a recruiter per se. I've never been in that industry. I've never really looked into it that much until now, until realizing, oh shoot, like this is like the workforce seems difficult, and maybe you guys can shine some light on it. Do you feel like the workforce as a whole, because it might also differ in terms of location here in the States, like I feel like experiences are vastly different. Like when I moved to this specific area, I feel like the workforce was kind of easy to get into, I'm not gonna lie, but at the same time the pay was very poor, very bad comparatively to what I've experienced or encountered in New York City. But it's interesting also how I've noticed like rents, it has increased substantially, but then we see salaries not increase that much. So you're merely trying to survive, and it's just so unrealistic. Truthfully, I just came across a video and someone said that they just moved here back from living internationally abroad, and they're like, it's insane how much their finances have been impacted. So I'll say that much. Maybe you guys can shine light. What has your experience been? Have you noticed a shift in regards to like applying in previous years compared to now? Naturally, there's been so many changes. We have to take into consideration that. But I'm going to share my experience a little bit on what I've encountered as someone that has also been interviewing back to back. So let me tell you guys, there was like radio silence for so long, maybe like for a month and a half. And then all of a sudden, like these past 2 weeks, it's just like bang, 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 bang. If you guys know, if you guys know, like the bands or group Cat's Eye, it just reminds me of that. But anyways, besides that, it's all of a sudden like we want to interview you, and it's like so hard to even schedule work. Sometimes they're like overlapping. I'm just like, oh, I can't do that day. But it's like, oh, but they're probably thinking, but I thought you were completely free. But it's like, yes, but I don't want to necessarily tell them, because they're like, oh, she's probably being considered by so many other opportunities or positions, and therefore we're not, going to even bother. We'll go with a candidate that doesn't have anything else, So, it's very tricky to navigate that, I'm sure. So I wanted to share something like that because I did not get considered for moving on for a certain position. And I wanted to share something because all these positions that I've interviewed for have been with Black, Brown management supervisors. And I've been very pleased and happy about that, because let me tell you guys, in previous positions, and I speak on this in regards to working at a hospital previously, and I made a whole video for that, how there was so much racism, blatant racism happening. And this is we're talking about an area that should be progressive. Like this, I'm in no way, shape, or form in the Midwest or somewhere, like the boonies, like, in a cave or something. I'm sorry. But truthfully, like I am, I am in a quote unquote more progressive area, yet, these topics, these very behaviors continue to be so prevalent, and you would assume that individuals that also are well educated or that have experiences dealing with wouldn't even talk like this. But it's so saddening how normalized it is, and in the workforce, out of all places where you're supposed to be exemplifying professionalism. My goodness. But anyways, I interviewed with an organization that's serving underserved communities. It's interesting because someone just asked me today, they're like, why do you want to work with underserved? I'm like, I'm part of, I'm going to keep it real, guys. A lot of people like to box, and this is something that also a lot of POCs encounter, where it's just like, they're often made to feel as if they're not whatever they are enough, right? They're not Black enough. They're not brown enough, right? In my case, you're not Latina enough. You're not, just because of the way you talk, the way you carry yourself, the way that you dress. And it's just like, no, I am also part of that. Like, just because, and, I really just had a great conversation with the manager, just chatting with them all in all, but it really just saddened me to see that, this is a reality for many individuals in this world, where it's just like, because you don't fit in this mold, you're automatically not like your community or part of your community, or you're in denial of who you are. But it's just like, no, maybe, like, everyone's an individual, and we all have different tastes. We all navigate the world differently. We have different experiences. So, kind of being questioned in regards to like what my life experiences have been. I'm just like, no, I really had, like, my parents had nothing when I was growing up. Man, and whew. And I'm sure that, a lot of people can speak for that experience, and can speak, because rich and wealthy is like, I don't know if it's 1%. I'm not sure what the percentage is, but it's just like, and naturally there are, individuals that are middle class, but I was nowhere, in no way, shape, or form. My parents are from 2 different countries. So it's interesting to just make that connection there, where it's just like, it's a lot of people assume just because, your circumstances might look a bit different, but hey, I attribute that also to, I'm going to say this much, programs and opportunities. That's why DEI there's been such an attempt to remove that, because the white community, it knows damn well that they've had access to all resources that existed. White privilege, let's keep it real, that's the DEI of the time, continues to be. And they are upset that communities of color are even given anything, right? They don't want to see communities of color prosper in any way, shape, or form. They expect communities of color to be in servitude, and like in serving them, essentially, right? Serving those that have had privilege. They want to keep our communities in a certain place where they are essentially dominating and dictating how we should live, and how we should, in what circumstances we should be. And naturally, with the removal of DEI, is this attempt to also remove programs that exist for individuals to get their foot in the door. Bearing in mind that white community has had access to everything due to the fact we know about colonization, we know about the stealing of this land, of also making the native indigenous community feel as if they're foreign to this land. It's interesting because I just saw a video. I don't know what his name is. I believe he works with CNN, or he was just having a conversation with like 20 conservatives or something like that. It's individuals that essentially uphold and believe in white supremacy. and it's so interesting how the individual that was having this interaction with him essentially pointed or stated or was hinting to the fact, if not blatantly saying, that whites are natives to this country, like native. And I understand what he's saying, but it's like, facts are facts. The reality in native indigenous communities were here previous. It's interesting how and I wanted to mention this, white communities will be like, oh, but we founded this land, therefore it belongs to us, as if stealing, which, mind you, there's always this mention of individuals, especially from Latin America or other countries, staying and being here illegally, but we're not going to call it out in terms of stealing this land as illegal. So, it's interesting how seeing the white community always say, well, we came. No, the reality of it, you stole this land, you stole the resources, you used it as an opportunity to enforce, right, terrorize communities that didn't have nothing. Like, the ammunition that Native American indigenous communities had wasn't up to par with the white community. And therefore they used that, right, in, like, once again, in embodying bully behavior, something I also speak about a lot in regards to just how bullying is such, it's almost like it's normalized and ingrained in this society where we are okay and we don't even care to address it and really be like, oh, okay, this is unacceptable behavior on a global scale, because America has essentially taken up this role of being that very thing, being a bully. And naturally, we saw that with colonization, terrorizing individuals using ammunition. Why not have a fair fight? If you are also saying in regards to merit it being earned, then have a fair fight. Let it be equal. It's not equal, right? Based off history. So it's always interesting how I see so many contradictions in the very talk and conversation that I hear time and time again with the white community. And I want to say also something else that stood out to me in regards to that interaction. I know I'm derailing completely, but this very individual obviously claimed, he was like, oh yes, we are native. No, you're native to Europe. But I want to say this much, because there's always like, well, we founded this country, we came in here and whatever, enforced and pushed power and dominance on these communities that had literally nothing. So how are they going to defend themselves? So okay, that's not admirable, but but I want to say that it's interesting that they're always like, well, we were here first. No, and then, oh yes, right. This is what the very individual was saying. He was saying, oh, the indigenous communities came from Asia. Doesn't matter, whatever. And that is still debatable. Here's the thing. Indigenous communities were here first. And this is often an argument that I hear with a lot of the white community. We're like, no, we were here first. No. You came here after, right? So they believe in, like, we are deserving. We deserve this country, despite that there was already a different population community here, because you were the first immigrant, which naturally they also don't want to take up, because it always seems like they're making everyone else to be out an immigrant, but they don't even want to acknowledge that they are European immigrants as well. So I really see so many contradictions where it's just like, when it benefits the white community, they'll use everything, but you can easily just like debunk that very belief, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. But that's besides the point. I wanted to speak on, I don't know how I got into that whole rant, but I want to say that I feel like I've been meaning to say that for a while. But here I am. I finally am. Given that I've been away for a bit. Excuse me. Uh, and yeah, so with that being said, the reason why I even bring up the white community is because in previous positions, I have had, and I am very mindful of working for organizations that the very individuals that are in management, the very individuals working there represent the very communities they're serving. I think there's a huge connection. It's like there's a bridge that is like is unified, and it's like, oh, like you're connect. I'm connecting, and it's just like it's really, really important for me because I went to this interview where once again they decided not to proceed with me, and the very individuals that were interviewing me, white women, and they had also invited me to interview for this role while I was at an event. They said, oh, hey, we would like you to apply for, and they were, one of the young ladies was very eager and interested. And, I was very conflicted because of those prior experiences that I've had, to be honest. I'm going to keep it 100% because it's interesting how in all past experiences while working with white management, especially white management that is at the same breath serving or working in nonprofit organizations and then serving communities of color, there has been a lot of racism displayed. And it's really exhausting, given the fact that you're serving our communities and displaying these behaviors. And they're detrimental, and they continue to be detrimental, which also leads me to say I do believe that management and anyone in a leadership position serving and working in a nonprofit organization that specifically serves underserved communities and specifically serves Black and Brown communities should reflect that very community. And I can actually share an example. I remember, and this was very short-lived because honestly, I know not everyone's going to have the opportunity to walk away from a position that is toxic and a position that doesn't serve them well. And when I actually had conversations with individuals on a professional working platform, if you guys know that I don't have other platforms that I've mentioned, and I don't really like to mention the platforms because it's almost as if I'm bringing attention to those platforms. But if you know where one of the professional where you have all your educational academic background, if you know one of those platforms, it might be just that one because it's probably the only one that exists. I remember asking about an experience, and this was regarding the hospital that I shared my experience on here about. And I honestly was encouraged by individuals to stay and be the light in that location. Woo, okay, so I feel like, honestly, I don't agree with that, given the fact that I don't agree with staying in situations that are not beneficial for you mentally and emotionally, period. I feel like this country and just about anywhere around the globe, they normalize abuse, and we should not be normalizing that. We shouldn't be normalizing the poor treatment of people, period. I feel like if you have the opportunity to leave and find better positions and opportunities, go do that. Go do that, especially if you're a person of color, because these organizations and places will kick you to the curb any opportunity that they have that they don't have, maybe the means, the financial means, or whatever it may be, or they don't see you being a good fit, whatever reason that they will make up naturally or figure out, sometimes it's just not a good match. Nonetheless, it's like these positions have no obligation to keep you as a person. So the same thing, like I feel like individuals should normalize, hey, I'm going to put myself first, because when I am able to put myself first, I can then put others right before me as well. So yes, so I feel like this has been something that has been rooted in humanity for much too long in whatever capacity, whether that be in the workforce, in relationships, and whatever it may be. If you're not in a place and space that you feel comfortable, that you feel supported, that you feel that your teammates or whoever it may be, it could be your family, it could be in relationships, have your back, then it is not serving you, right? And I know that there is a lot more to that, and it's complex when it goes beyond the workforce, but just something to be mindful of, because I feel like there's always this normalization of poor treatment of individuals and people, and we should not tolerate that. And that's something that, this is why my channel exists. I don't have any tolerance for the treatment of the Black and brown community in a poor way, or being treated differently, all in all. And that is how I move in the real world. So when I see things like that, because this applies to everyone as a whole in terms of humans, and also beyond that, because I also speak on the ensuring that we as humans also protect our environment, also protect animals, because they are vulnerable. They require and need us in order to thrive in life. So I feel like I'm a very, and if you are a very emotional, empathetic, compassionate person, share it down below, because I feel like I don't meet too many people that have a heart for all of the world very much, or at all, honestly. Whew. So just share that below. How do you get through it? How do you thrive as a human? Let me know, because honestly, it's just so difficult. But I feel like I've been derailing too often, and I just want to get into it. So I did interview with 2 white women, and honestly, I was really hesitant. I was like, I'm not sure how I feel. So it feels like there's a silver lining to it all, of not being, not moving forward, given the fact, and this was something I was going to share as well, in a previous, and this was not at the hospital, but a different location. It was a nonprofit clinic. And one of my colleagues, which was a Latina, she mentioned how our supervisor, when she was making a decision regarding hiring a specific candidate, she blatantly, or perhaps in a less blatant, I don't know, I wasn't present, but it was like the manager, which a white woman, didn't or was hesitant to hire a specific individual just due to their racial ethnic background. So I honestly see a lot of these behaviors, and once again, individuals as a whole, because I've wanted to talk about things that I've noticed, I've seen on media online, and this is something I've dabbled in or spoken about in regards to feminism. How, feminism, to be honest, is not in any way, shape, or form, more than often, if not at any time, uplifting Black and brown women. And I wanted to actually dive into some like there was, and I don't want to be so specific about it, but it was young ladies within a show, and I didn't actually watch the show, but it's just interesting to see that very behavior reflected. And it's also interesting given the fact that I am working or speaking on having to deal with these situations, and just even off the top of my mind, when I think about the very supervisors or managers. Yes, in one scenario, I remember there being white male management that displayed very immature and borderline just unprofessionalism. But most of the time, it's been white women having me second guess whether they really do it, or they even embody, any, and naturally they might not align with feminism, or supporting women and quote unquote being a girl's girl. A lot of times when people go by that, they're often very much not. So but just seeing those behaviors time and time again, and reflected especially from a specific community that I feel like should know better, given the fact that women, we know, have been oppressed historically. And it brings to mind actually that what is she? She's one of the representatives. I'm not even sure. Green. I spoke about her. I think it was Green. I spoke about her in previous videos. She's all of a sudden realizing, and she's part of the Conservative Party, Republican Party, all of a sudden realizing, oh wow, like these men don't treat me equal. Yeah. Surprise. Surprise. Surprise, ma'am. But yeah, so like I'm just always amazed by individuals that as soon as they experience some form of oppression, and even when they know about the oppression that exists towards women, they refuse to even realize how they are often, if not always, oppressive towards women of color. So it's more of like, how can I be the benefactor without you? Like, as long as I'm benefiting, and I've spoken about this many, many times, individuals often forget where they came from. We know European immigrants came here fleeing their own circumstances, their own issues, and they came here, right, poor, and yet they forgot that very thing. And not always, I'm not saying all of them did, but many, not most. And same thing for other white communities that were once marginalized. Let's talk about the Jewish community, right? They weren't considered white at one point. The Italian community, they weren't considered white at one point, and forgot. It's like they've forgotten that their ancestors were oppressed. People, time and time again, forget that they were once oppressed and then become the oppressor. But this is a time to also just reflect on people's biases, because, and maybe I should dive right into what I wanted to talk about, and hopefully I don't get cut off anytime soon if I do. But there's been a lot of mentions, and I personally didn't watch the show, but there was a lot of mentions in regards to the backlash that Shelley and Olandria have received from the show. And let me say something, Shelley and Olandria, you guys are very beautiful. Don't listen to these haters. Let's keep it real. Listen to these haters. I feel like there's a lot of, and I noticed this a lot, even when I've just gone about, like, going places. For example, I've had, and a lot of my friends just look like they're from just about anywhere. I've seen the difference in treatment, and that is something that a lot of people need to confront their subconscious biases and beliefs that often are rooted on racism, colorism. They think that attacking and being aggressive, especially towards people of color, which is something I see all the time, they label people of color as aggressive. They label people of color as problematic, yet they're the very ones being problematic. I mean, there's a whole term, Karen, for a very reason. And there should be one for the men too, Kens. But, it's interesting how their aggression is never accounted for, is never addressed, is never put to that same standard, which I also mentioned on previous videos. Their standards, they don't have any standards. The world, and it's sad to see that people of color don't also make sure that they set standards for the white community. Because then, they're walking right over communities of color, and they'll continue to do so. And I find that Shelley Olandria, which is once again will also bring me to, people in this world have normalized unhealthy, toxic behavior and have made it normal. have excused that behavior, have used every excuse in the book to justify the racist acts of the white community by calling it mental health issues, calling it X, Y, and Z, not addressing it for what it is, not making it accountable for what it is. So I do find the same type of behavior when it concerns women. But when all is said and done, like I said, there's a lot of subconscious racism and colorism that exists. And just when someone that has some more melanin is trying to stand up for themselves, is trying to put boundaries or place boundaries, all of a sudden it's a problem. It's a problem. So let's call it for what it is. Black and brown people have every right to establish boundaries. And I encourage all of my Black brothers and sisters to really also take a moment to reflect on their subconscious biases, because sometimes we're excusing behavior from communities that have historically oppressed the white community, historically oppressed our communities, and giving them a pass. And then at the same breath, we're not having those same standards for the Black and brown community. We're not having the grace, right? We're not having the grace that our community very much need. Our communities that need that grace, because it wasn't our communities that came and stole land. It wasn't our communities that oppressed people. It wasn't our communities that have tried to kill people historically and continue to do so, as we see in the Middle East, right? So, and other places around the globe where, there are colonization has never stopped. It's continuously happening around the globe, and we need to call it for what it is. We need to address it for what it is. And it's not until we all, as people of color, start having standards in terms of the treatment that not only we receive, our brothers and sisters receive, and saying no more. Because this country and this world has normalized poor treatment of people and things around us. And we need to ensure that we set those standards. We tell people, we establish boundaries, which is something that I believe Shelley and Alandra were attempting to do, and we're doing, right? And that is the type of way that we should move, okay? Okay? We as people should have standards. End of story. Don't ever think that your life is not valuable, right? Don't ever think that